Chicago 2025 was a city of dazzling lights and shadowy alleys, where the vibrancy of downtown intertwined with the dangers of the slums. Tonight in the South Side, the air was bitingly cold, and Aisha Carter, a 28-year-old Black American woman, felt every breath tear through her chest. She was running along the muddy stretch of 63rd Street, her worn sneakers pounding against the sidewalk. A high fever made her head spin, and sweat soaked through her thin coat despite the chill of June. Behind her, heavy footsteps and harsh shouts were drawing closer. "There she is!" A man's voice roared, echoing through the abandoned buildings. "Don't let her get away." Aisha didn't know who they were, or why they were chasing her. All she knew was that she had to run, had to survive. The past 6 blocks had been a nightmare since she left the tiny bookstore in Bronzeville, where she worked, and realized 3 shadowy figures were silently trailing her. At first, she thought she was imagining it, fever blurring everything, distorting the world like looking through shattered glass. But when one of them stepped forward to block her path, the streetlight illuminated his face. Cold eyes, a sinister grin. Aisha knew this wasn't a hallucination. She turned and ran, her heart pounding like it would explode. Her legs trembled, not just from illness, but from pure fear. Aisha was no stranger to hardship. She had grown up in a cramped apartment in Englewood, lost her father at 10, and her mother to illness a few years later. Scholarships and part-time jobs had carried her through college, but life had never been easy. She'd learned how to protect herself and walk faster when danger lurked on Chicago's streets. But this time, she had no plan, no exit. Only raw instinct drove her forward. Streetlights flickered, casting a yellow hue that made everything look surreal. Aisha glanced back briefly and saw the 3 figures following her barely a block behind. One, tall and clad in a leather jacket, pointed in her direction, shouting something she couldn't make out. Her heart raced so fast, it hurt, a sharp pain spreading through her chest. The fever meds had weakened her, but fear had pumped strange adrenaline into her veins, pushing her beyond her limits. She turned sharply into an alley, hoping to lose them. Metal trash bins were knocked over, the stench of rotting garbage thick in the air. She stumbled on a broken beer bottle and nearly fell, but a rough brick wall caught her hand and kept her upright. The alley opened onto a larger street, neon lights from diners and liquor stores burning into her eyes. Aisha paused, panting, trying to decide which way to run. Footsteps echoed again, closer than ever. She had no time. That's when she saw a sleek black sedan parked by the curb, the engine still running, and the driver's door ajar, as if someone had just stepped out. Streetlight reflected off the glossy paint, gleaming like an invitation. Aisha didn't hesitate. She bolted forward, yanked open the back door, and threw herself onto the soft leather seat, slamming the door shut. "Drive!" she shouted, her voice hoarse with panic. She ducked low, trying to hide from the windows. The car didn't move. Aisha looked up, heart hammering, and saw a man sitting in the driver's seat, staring at her through the rearview mirror. He had dark blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a face marked by surprise and caution. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, but not harsh. "What are you doing in my car?" Aisha panicked, her hand gripping the door handle, ready to leap out. But through the window, she saw the 3 men appear at the corner, scanning the area like predators. One pointed at the car, and all 3 began approaching. "Please, Aisha," whispered voice, trembling. "They're chasing me. I don't know what they want, but I need help. Please drive." The man, James Sullivan, though Aisha didn't know his name yet, looked where she pointed. He saw the 3 men, their aggressive postures advancing at a dangerous pace. One pulled something shiny from his coat, maybe a knife, or worse. James didn't hesitate. He stepped on the gas, the car gliding smoothly into traffic on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. Aisha felt her body sink into the seat, her breathing beginning to slow, though she was still trembling. "Are you okay?" James asked, eyes focused on the road, but their voice filled with concern. He drove with the calm of someone familiar with pressure, but his gaze in the mirror was gentle, like he wanted to reassure her. Aisha nodded, though she was anything but okay. Her mouth was dry, her head spinning, and the fever blurred everything like a waking nightmare. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft she wasn't sure he heard it. She looked out the window, watching Chicago's lights glide by distant skyscrapers, 24-hour sandwich shops, homeless figures curled up on the sidewalks. She had lived in this city her whole life, but never had it felt so dangerous. "I'm James," he said, breaking the silence. "What's your name, Aisha?" she replied, voice still shaky. She glanced at him, trying to read the man behind the wheel. James looked in his 30s, well-dressed in a white shirt and gray vest, but not flashy. The car, new leather scent, sleek dashboard suggested wealth, but his speech was grounded, unpretentious. That made her both curious and cautious. Men like him didn't usually show up in the South Side not to help a fleeing stranger. "Those guys," James continued, voice calm but sharp. "Do you know why they were after you?" Aisha shook her head. "I don't know. I was just walking home from work and they started following me. I tried to run, but—" She trailed off, a cough rising in her throat. She covered her mouth, trying to suppress it, but it tore through her with pain. James frowned, clearly noticing she wasn't well. "You need a doctor," he said. "I can take you to the hospital." "No," Aisha responded quickly, almost shouting. She took a breath, trying to calm down. "I mean, I can't go to the hospital. I don't have insurance and I don't want trouble. I need to get home." But she knew her home wasn't safe even as she said it. Those men might already know where she lived. The thought twisted her stomach. James looked at her through the mirror, as if weighing something. "Listen, Aisha," he said firmly. "I don't know what's happening, but you're not safe if you return. Those guys aren't just drunk creeps. They had a purpose. I have a safe place, my home in Lincoln Park. You can rest there, and we'll figure things out." Aisha hesitated. She wasn't used to trusting strangers, especially not a wealthy man like James. Chicago had taught her kindness rarely came free. But when she looked out the window and saw the three men had vanished into traffic, she realized she had no choice. She was tired, scared, and sick. If James had meant her harm, he wouldn't have driven away. "All right," she said softly, voice barely audible. "Thank you, James." James nodded, saying nothing more. He drove through the crowded streets, city lights streaking past like falling stars. Aisha leaned her head against the window, the feeling of temporary safety wrapping around her, though she knew this nightmare was far from over. Those men were still out there, and the mystery of why they chased her was only beginning. She couldn't have known that this car, and the man behind the wheel, would change her life forever. The black sedan glided smoothly through the crowded streets of Chicago, neon lights from store signs reflecting on the windows like blurred streaks of light. Aisha Carter sat curled up in the back seat, arms wrapped tightly around herself, trying to suppress the tremors from fever and adrenaline. She glanced at James Sullivan through the rearview mirror, who was driving with quiet focus. His sharp blue eyes occasionally flicked in her direction, not with suspicion, but with a subtle concern, as if he were trying to assess what she needed without scaring her further. Aisha wasn't used to the feeling of being protected. In her world, in unstable Englewood, survival depended on yourself, not on wealthy strangers. "Are you okay, Aisha?" James asked, his voice low and steady, breaking the silence in the car. He had just turned off Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, heading north, where the towering buildings of downtown gradually gave way to more upscale neighborhoods. Aisha nodded, though she wasn't okay at all. The fever muddled her mind, and the memory of the three men chasing her still made her heart race. I think so," she replied hoarsely. She coughed softly, covering her mouth with her sleeve, feeling a sharp pain in her chest. "Thank you for helping me. I don't know who they were, but if you hadn't been there—" She trailed off, not wanting to think about what might have happened. James gave a slight nod, his eyes still fixed on the road. "Don't worry. You're safe now. We're almost at my place in Lincoln Park. You can rest, and we'll figure out what's going on." He spoke with the confidence of someone used to solving problems, but Aisha couldn't help wondering, why was he helping her? A man like him, wealthy, well-dressed, driving an expensive car, had no reason to risk anything for a strange girl from the South Side. She looked out the window and saw the scenery changing. The South Side's liquor stores and fast food joints gave way to rows of well-maintained red brick houses, small parks with lush trees and trendy coffee shops. Lincoln Park was a different world, one Aisha rarely stepped into, except for rare book deliveries to wealthy clients. She felt out of place like a fish flung onto land. The car turned onto a quiet street lined with modern homes, large glass windows, and low iron fences. James stopped in front of a 3-story building with a facade of glass and gray stone, elegant yet discreet. He pressed a button on the dashboard, and the garage gate slowly opened. "We're here," he said gently. "Let's go." Aisha hesitated, her hand still gripping the door handle. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "I mean, I don't want to impose. If you just let me borrow your phone, I could call a friend or—" James turned, looking directly at her for the first time. His eyes were kind but firm. "Aisha, you have a fever. You 3 unidentified men just chased you, and you look like you're about to collapse. I'm not letting you go anywhere in that condition. My home is secure and well protected. You can rest, get something to eat, and we'll figure out the next step." "Okay." His words were sincere without a hint of pressure. Aisha took a deep breath and nodded. She stepped out of the car, her legs weak and unsteady. James quickly came around, offering a steadying hand to her elbow, but keeping a respectful distance. "Careful," he said, guiding her through a door from the garage up to the main floor. Inside, James's home was spacious, but not flashy. Dark wooden floors, white walls adorned with a few abstract paintings, and a large window looking out over a small garden in the back. There were no gaudy decorations or showy furniture like Aisha had imagined rich people would have. Instead, everything was neat and practical, as if the owner valued comfort over display. A large gray sofa dominated the living room, facing an electric fireplace, casting a warm glow. "Have a seat," James said, gesturing to the sofa. "I'll get some water and call a doctor." "No doctor," Aisha replied quickly, sitting down. The sofa was so soft it felt like it was swallowing her whole. "I need to rest a bit. I get fevers often. It's not a big deal." But even as she said it, she knew this was worse than usual. She'd ignored her illness too long, working nonstop to keep up with rent and bills. James frowned, clearly unconvinced, but didn't push. "All right, but at least let me get you some water and fever meds." He disappeared into the adjoining kitchen, leaving Aisha alone in the quiet space. She looked around, noting the contrast between this place and her cramped apartment in Englewood, where the walls were stained and the faucets always leaked. She wondered what James did to afford a home like this. Businessman, investor, or just some wealthy heir. James returned with a glass of water and a bottle of pills. "Paracetamol," he said, placing the bottle on the table. "It'll help with the fever. Have you eaten? I can order something or make a quick dish." Aisha shook her head, cradling the glass with both hands. "I'm not hungry, but thank you." She took a sip, the coolness soothing her dry throat. "You don't have to do all this, you know. I I just needed a place to hide for a bit. James sat in the chair across from her, keeping a respectful distance. I understand. But I couldn't just ignore that you were in danger. Those guys, they weren't amateurs. Are you sure you don't remember why they were after you? Has anyone threatened you recently? Aisha shook her head, trying to search her memory. No. I work at a bookstore live alone, and don't get involved. I don't even have close friends with whom to share this. She let out a dry laugh, but it quickly faded. My life is ordinary, or at least I thought it was. James nodded, thoughtful. All right. It's not about you directly, but something connected to your work, family, or past. Do you have any family in Chicago? The question made Aisha pause. She looked down at her glass fingers, tightening around it. No one left. My dad died when I was 10. My mom passed 5 years ago from cancer. I grew up in Englewood and survived on scholarships and side jobs. I don't have anyone to rely on, and I like it that way. At least I don't have to worry about anyone else. Her tone had a slight edge, as if shielding herself from pity. But James didn't react as she expected. He didn't look sorry or try to offer hollow comfort. Instead, he nodded, as if respecting her independence. You're stronger than you think, Aisha. Not everyone survives what you've been through and still stands tall like this. His words caught her off guard. She looked at him, searching for any trace of insincerity, but found only honesty. You don't know me, she said quietly. Why do you trust me? I could be anyone, a scammer, a thief. Why didn't you kick me out? James gave a soft smile, the first since she'd met him. I run a business, Aisha. I'm good at reading people. And I saw someone who's scared, not someone who's lying. Besides, I'm not the kind of person who abandons someone in need. You needed a safe place, and I could offer it. That's all. Aisha didn't know how to respond. She wanted to believe him, but life had taught her kindness usually came with a price. She took another sip of water, trying to shake the doubt. What do you do to afford a place like this? She asked, changing the subject. I mean this house, the car. You don't look like someone working in a bakery or driving a bus. James chuckled, a warm, low sound. I run a construction company, Sullivan Enterprises. We build hotels, shopping centers, that sort of thing. It's not exciting, but it keeps me busy. He said it casually, as if owning a business empire was no big deal. Aisha nodded, unsure whether to be impressed. And you live here alone? Yes, James replied, his tone dipping slightly. I don't have much time for family or friends. Work takes up most of my life. He paused, as if realizing he'd revealed too much. But that's another story. Right now, you need rest. I have a guest room upstairs. It's comfortable. You can stay there tonight. Aisha opened her mouth to protest, but another cough interrupted her. She felt herself weakening, her eyelids heavy. I don't want to be a burden, she said, just tonight. I'll leave tomorrow. All right, James replied, standing. But tomorrow morning, we need to talk about those men. They won't stop, and I don't want you out there alone. Aisha nodded, too tired to argue. James led her up the stairs to a small but cozy bedroom with a large bed covered in white linens and a window overlooking the quiet street. There's a private bathroom there. He pointed to a door. If you need anything, I'll be downstairs. Just call. Thank you, Aisha said softly. When James left, she instinctively locked the door, though she knew it wasn't necessary. She sat on the bed, feeling the mattress pull her into another world. She checked her phone, a cracked old one, and found no messages or missed calls. No one knew she was here. No one would worry if she disappeared. The thought made her both sad and strangely relieved. She took the paracetamol James had left and lay down, closing her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. The images of the three men, Cold eyes, threatening posture still haunted her mind. She didn't know why they had chased her, but her instincts told her this wasn't random. Something from her past, or someone connected to her, was dragging her into a storm she wasn't ready to face. Downstairs, James sat in his office, the light from his computer screen illuminating his face. He had already messaged Michael, his head of security, instructing him to check traffic cameras around the south side for traces of the three men. He hadn't told Aisha, but he had realized something: those men weren't amateurs. They moved in coordination, as if hired for a specific task. And James, though not usually one to interfere in strangers' problems, felt an odd compulsion to protect this woman. Maybe it was the defiance in her eyes, even through her fear. Perhaps it was because he understood loneliness, even in a different form. In the dark of Chicago, the three men stood in an alley, not far from Lincoln Park, speaking on the phone, with a cold voice on the other end. One reported that she got into Sullivan's car. "We lost her." "James Sullivan?" The voice asked, a trace of surprise. "Interesting. Find her. And if Sullivan gets in the way, deal with him too." Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft streaks across the wooden floor of James Sullivan's living room. Aisha Carter woke up on the plush bed, her body still aching, but the fever had broken. The paracetamol and a fitful night's sleep had restored some of her strength. She sat up, scanning the cozy yet straightforward room, feeling like she was in another world, so different from her tiny, noisy apartment in Englewood. The sound of traffic from the streets of Lincoln Park drifted in gentler than the horns and daily arguments of her old neighborhood. Aisha looked at her cracked phone on the bedside table. The screen was still black, and the battery had been dead since last night. No missed calls. No messages. She wondered if anyone at the bookstore noticed she hadn't shown up. Her boss, Mr. Harris, might be annoyed, but he wasn't the type to call the police. Aisha was used to managing independently, but an uneasy dread lingered this time. The men chasing her last night weren't random street thugs. They had a purpose, and she needed to know what it was. She got up and washed her face in the small adjoining bathroom, trying to make herself look less wrecked. Her reflection was still pale despite her deep brown skin, but her eyes, those determined brown eyes, were clear. "I can't hide forever," she muttered, tying her hair into a neat bun. She wore the same jeans and thin coat from the night before, clothes that felt out of place in this house, this world, and James's presence. Downstairs, she found James in the kitchen brewing coffee. He wore a simple blue button-down, with the sleeves rolled up, a far more relaxed look than the sharp suit from the night before. The smell of coffee made her stomach growl, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. James looked up as she entered, offering a soft smile. "Good morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Aisha replied, sitting at the small wooden table. "Thank you for everything. I'm not used to people helping me like this." James placed a cup of coffee in front of her and a plate of toast and jam. "Eat something. You'll need strength for today." He sat across from her, his expression turning serious. "I contacted a friend, Michael, who handles security for my company. Last night he checked traffic cameras around the south side. The men chasing you weren't amateurs, Aisha. They moved like mercenaries, highly organized. We need to find out who sent them." Aisha wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "Mercenaries," she echoed, her voice trembling. "But why? I don't have anything valuable. I'm just a bookstore clerk living paycheck to paycheck. I don't owe anyone money. I'm not involved in anything shady." James nodded as if expecting that. "I believe you. But sometimes trouble doesn't come from what you've done. It comes from what you know, or what someone thinks you know. Is there anything from your or your family's past that could be connected? You said your parents passed away, but is there anyone else? Relatives? Old friends of the family? You remember?" Aisha shook her head, but James's question gave her pause. Her father, Robert Carter, was a vague memory. He died in a car accident when she was 10, an event her mother rarely spoke of. Aisha remembered a quiet man who always double-checked the locks at night and seemed worried about something she didn't understand. "My dad worked an office job," she said slowly, trying to recall. "I'm not sure where. My mom said he was an accountant. He never talked much about it. After he died, my mom didn't like to bring him up. She said it hurt too much." James's eyes narrowed, his expression sharper. An accountant. That could be a lead. Some companies use accountants to hide illegal operations. If your dad was involved in something shady, someone might think you know about it. Aisha's stomach tightened. Illegal. No, my dad wasn't that kind of man. He was normal. He read me bedtime stories. He made pancakes on Sundays. He wasn't a criminal. But even as she said it, she realized how little she truly remembered. She was just a child when he died, and her mother had buried the pain by burying the past. Before James could respond, the doorbell rang, startling Aisha. James stood and checked the security monitor on the wall. "It's Michael," he said, pressing a button to open the gate. A tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped inside, dressed neatly in a black suit. He gave Aisha a polite nod, professional, not warm. "James, I have something," Michael said, placing an iPad on the table. He pulled up footage from a traffic camera showing the 3 men who had chased Aisha the night before. One wore a leather jacket, the other 2 in dark clothes with caps pulled low over their faces. "We traced them to a warehouse on the west side," Michael continued. "A shell company owns it, but I dug deeper. The real owner is Anthony Moretti." James's expression darkened. He recognized the name. Moretti. That crime boss. Aisha looked between them, feeling out of her depth. "Who's Anthony Moretti?" she asked, tension in her voice. Michael glanced at James, seeking permission, then answered. "Moretti's one of the biggest crime lords in Chicago. He runs everything: drugs, illegal casinos, money laundering. He's careful. It leaves no trail. If his men are after you, he thinks you have something he wants, or thinks you know something." Aisha shook her head, the world shifting under her feet. "But I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about him." Her voice rose, panic laced with confusion. James placed a steady hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "It's okay, Aisha. We'll figure it out." "Michael, anything connected to her father?" Michael nodded and opened another file on the iPad. "I checked old records. Robert Carter worked as an accountant for Horizon Investments in the 1990s. That company was a front for Moretti's operations. Carter left the company in 2009, just before he died in the car crash. There were rumors, unconfirmed, that he took something before leaving. A list of offshore bank accounts may contain hundreds of millions of dirty money. If Moretti thinks she has it or knows where it is, he won't stop." Aisha's face went pale. She stared at the old photo of her father on the screen. Short hair, thin wire glasses, a faint smile she barely remembered. "No way," she whispered. "My dad wasn't a thief. And if he did take something, why wouldn't he leave it for me? He died when I was a kid. All I have are a few pictures and memories. Nothing valuable." James exchanged a look with Michael. "Maybe he hid it," James said. "Not for you to find, but to protect you. But Moretti doesn't care. He thinks you know, so he's coming after you." Aisha held her head in her hands, trying to absorb everything. Her father, the man who sang her to sleep and taught her how to ride a bike, might have been involved in crime. The thought hurt like her childhood was being tainted. "So what now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "If he thinks I have it, he won't stop, is he?" James nodded, his expression resolute. "No. But you're not alone, Aisha. I'll help you. We'll figure out what your father left behind and how to make Moretti back off. Michael interjected, his tone practical. James, I have to warn you. Moretti isn't someone you want as an enemy. If he finds out she's here, you won't just be protecting her. You'll be a target too. I know, James replied firmly. But I'm not letting her face this alone. Keep digging. Find anyone who's still alive who worked with Carter, and tighten security around here. Michael nodded, collecting his iPad. I'll update you as soon as I have more. He left, leaving James and Aisha in heavy silence. Aisha looked down at her coffee, her mind spinning. I don't get it, she said softly. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me, but you're willing to go up against someone like Moretti. Why? James looked at her, his expression sincere. Because I know what it's like to feel trapped. I didn't grow up like you, but I've been in situations where I wished someone had my back. And because I see you, a woman who's fought her whole life, but refuses to give up. I can't walk away when someone like that needs help. His words touched something profound in Aisha, but caution still lingered. She wanted to trust him, but the truth about her father made her question everything. If my dad took something, she said slowly, and Moretti wants it, then I need to find it first. I don't want to keep running. James nodded, admiration flickering in his eyes. Then we'll find it. But first you need food and rest. Today you're safe. Tomorrow we start. Aisha took a deep breath, determination building. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but she didn't feel entirely alone for the first time in years. In the dark corners of Chicago, Anthony Moretti was already moving. He sat in his lavish high-rise office, looking down on the city phone clenched tightly. Find her, he ordered, his voice like ice. And if Sullivan gets in the way, I want them both gone. The Chicago sky that morning was covered in gray clouds, as if foreshadowing a day full of unrest. Aisha Carter sat in the passenger seat of James Sullivan's black sedan, hands clenched tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the window. The streets from Lincoln Park to Englewood passed by like a reel of film, shifting from rows of elegant red brick houses to dilapidated apartment blocks, shuttered storefronts, and walls covered in graffiti. She felt a familiar tension as they returned to her old neighborhood, where she had grown up, where she'd learned how to survive, but now felt like a battlefield. James drove with quiet focus, his sharp blue eyes occasionally glancing her way. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked in a low voice. Your apartment may not be safe. We can have Michael pick up the box. Aisha shook her head, her voice firm. No, I need to check for myself. If my father hid something, it'll be in the photo box my mom left me. I don't want anyone else touching it. She paused, taking a deep breath. And I don't want to wait for Moretti to find me. I need to do something. James nodded, his gaze reflecting respect. All right. But we'll make it quick. Michael and another man are coming with us in case of trouble. Aisha nodded, though her heart pounded. Last night, after the conversation with Michael, she had tried to sleep, but images of her father, the man she had always believed to be ordinary, now possibly a thief, who had crossed a crime boss, haunted her. She dug through her memories, trying to recall anything unusual. Once when she was 8, her father brought home a small box, calling it essential. After he died, her mother had given the box to her, saying it only contained family photos. Aisha had never thought much of it until now. Was there something hidden in those pictures? The car stopped before the old 3-story apartment building in Englewood where Aisha lived. The outer walls were stained. The front door creaked loudly, and the hallway smelled dampness and mold. Michael James's head of security led the way. His hand near his belt, Aisha guessed a concealed weapon was there. Another man, tall and silent, followed behind, eyes scanning every corner. James stayed close beside her, his hand briefly touching her elbow, an unspoken gesture of reassurance. "Hold here," Michael said, as they reached her second-floor apartment. He checked the door and frowned. "The lock's been tampered with. Someone's been inside." Aisha felt her blood freeze. When she asked, voice tense. "Not long ago," Michael replied, opening the door cautiously. "Footprints are still fresh on the floor." Inside her small apartment was a mess. Books had been pulled off shelves and thrown to the ground. The couch was flipped over, cushions slashed open. The kitchen table was buried in paper bills, flyers, like someone had gone through every inch. Aisha stood frozen, her heart racing. This was her home, small and humble, but it had now been violated. "What were they looking for?" she whispered, stepping carefully through the wreckage. She headed straight for the bedroom, where she kept the photo box in her closet. Kneeling, she pulled away her winter coat, her hands trembling as she reached the corner. "It's still here," she breathed, pulling out an old tin box, rusted but intact. She hugged it to her chest as if holding a piece of her parents' memory. James knelt beside her, his expression alert. "They didn't find it. That's lucky. Let's open it." Aisha lifted the lid. A faint scent of old paper and ink wafted out. Inside were about 20 photographs. Pictures of her as a child, her parents on their wedding day, family outings at the park. She flipped through them, heart pounding. "Just family photos," she said, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Nothing special." Michael, still standing guard at the door, chimed in. "Sometimes the important stuff is hidden in plain sight. Check carefully backs of the photos, corners, anything unusual." Aisha nodded and examined a photo of her father standing in front of a warehouse, flanked by several unfamiliar men. On the back, written in pencil, was Group 1995. She frowned and looked closer. In the bottom corner, faint and almost invisible, were tiny numbers revealed under the light. "Look at this," she said, handing the photo to James. "Numbers. Could it be a code?" James took the photo, his eyes lighting up. "It could be a bank account code. Or coordinates. Check the others." Aisha and James went through the rest of the photos carefully. 7 had similar numbers written in pencil, either in corners or on the backs barely visible to the naked eye. Aisha felt a mix of awe and sadness. "My father was wise," she murmured. "He hid them where no one would ever think to look." James nodded. "He wanted to protect you. But Moretti believes you have or know where to find them." Suddenly, Michael raised a hand, signaling for silence, his ear pressed to an earpiece. "There's a car pulling up in front of the building," he whispered. "2 men have the same profile as last night. We need to move." Aisha clutched the photo box tighter, her heart thudding. James grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. "Let's go," he said, guiding her toward the back door and down the fire escape. Michael and the other man led the way, weapons drawn. They emerged into a back alley where a black SUV waited. James pushed Aisha into the back seat and climbed beside her as Michael sped off. Through the rear window, Aisha saw 2 men enter the apartment building, one on the phone, both tense and focused. "They knew I was here," she said, voice shaking. "How did they know?" James squeezed her hand. "Moretti has eyes everywhere. But you're safe now. We have the photos, and that gives us the edge." Aisha looked down at the box on her lap, both determined and terrified. These numbers might be the key to ending this nightmare, or might pull her deeper into it. She glanced at James, who stared out the window, jaw-set eyes steely. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying." James turned back to her with a faint smile. "We're a team, Aisha. We'll get through this." The SUV sped through the streets of Englewood, heading toward Lincoln Park. But nearby, on a shadowy corner, a man stood in the dark, speaking into a phone. "She has some box," the man reported. "Sullivan's with her. I want more men." Anthony Moretti's voice crackled on the other end, cold, razor-sharp. "Get the box at any cost." The black SUV sped through the streets of Chicago, the streetlights flashing like blurry streaks of light. Aisha Carter sat in the back seat, clutching the tin box that held her family photos, the only clues to the secret her father Robert Carter had hidden. Beside her, James Sullivan scrolled through his phone, his sharp blue eyes scanning with alert focus. Michael, the head of security, drove intensely, occasionally glancing at the rearview mirror to ensure they weren't being followed. The tension in the car was thick, as if all three could feel the tightening grip of Anthony Moretti closing in on them. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to push away the fear. The numbers on the backs of the photos, possibly account codes tied to hundreds of millions of Moretti's dollars, filled her with equal parts curiosity and dread. She couldn't understand how her father, who once taught her how to play chess in the park, could be involved in such a criminal underworld. But one thing was clear: she couldn't keep running. "James," she said quietly, her voice steady, "what will we do with the photos? If Moretti wants them, we can use them to negotiate." James turned to her, eyes thoughtful. "I've been thinking the same. If we give him just enough information, enough to convince him we have the rest, he might leave you alone. But Moretti isn't the kind of man who compromises. We'll have to tread carefully." Michael spoke up from the driver's seat, his tone practical and grim. "Negotiating with Moretti is like playing with fire. He doesn't just want money. He wants control. If she has the account list, he'll do anything to get it back, including kill." Aisha's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Then we pick a public place. He can't do anything with witnesses around." James nodded, a spark of respect in his eyes. "Good idea. I know a restaurant downtown loose on Michigan Avenue. Always busy, plenty of eyes. I'll reach out to Moretti's people and set it up." Aisha nodded, even as her stomach churned. She didn't want to face a crime lord, but was tired of running. She wanted her life back. Her job at the bookstore, quiet evenings, reading in her tiny apartment, her dream of starting a reading corner for kids in Bronzeville. She glanced at James, grateful he was still here. He didn't have to be involved, but he stayed, which gave her strength. They began preparing for the meeting at James's house in Lincoln Park. James contacted an intermediary and proposed a meeting with Moretti the next day at noon at Luce. Aisha sat at the dining table, reviewing the photos again and trying to memorize the numbers. She chose 3 sequences from one of the photos, not the whole set, but enough to prove they had something real. James copied them onto a small piece of paper, his expression serious. "We'll give him this," he said. "If he wants more, he has to agree to leave you alone." Aisha nodded, doubt clouding her chest. "Do you think he'll agree?" James paused, then answered honestly, "I'm not sure, but it's our best shot at learning what he wants." The next day at Luce, the upscale restaurant buzzed with conversation and the clinking of silverware against fine china. The large glass walls overlooked the busy Michigan Avenue, filled with pedestrians and passing cars. Aisha sat beside James at a table near the window, doing her best to look calm, though her heart was racing. She wore a soft blue sweater borrowed from James's closet, feeling out of place among the elegantly dressed diners. Michael sat at a nearby table, pretending to read the newspaper, but Aisha knew he was watching everything. Precisely at noon, Anthony Moretti entered. He was short-dressed in an expensive gray suit, his hair slicked back, but his dark eyes were cold and sharp as blades. 2 large men followed behind, their gazes scanning the room. Moretti smiled, but the smile never touched his eyes. He sat across from Aisha and James without shaking hands or exchanging pleasantries. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Thanks for arranging the meeting." James nodded calmly. "Mr. Moretti, I think we can resolve this without violence." Moretti turned to Aisha, and she felt a chill down her spine. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone almost gentle, "you remind me of your father. Robert was clever, but not smart enough to know his place. Aisha clenched her hands under the table, steadying her voice. What do you know about my father? If you think I have something of yours, you're wrong. I don't know anything. Moretti let out a dry chuckle. Don't play dumb, girl. Your father took something that wasn't his, a list of bank accounts holding $500 million of my money. That money isn't just money. It's power. It's survival. And I know you have it. James cut in, voice firm. If she had it, you wouldn't have sent men to ransack her apartment or chase her through the streets. But we did find this. He slid the slip of paper with 3 codes across the table. This is part of what you're looking for. Let her go, and you get more. Moretti took the paper, his eyes flicking over the numbers. Surprise flickered across his face, but he quickly masked it. 3 accounts, he said coolly. Not enough. I want the complete list. Aisha's anger surged. You don't get to make demands, she said sharply. You killed my father, didn't you? That car accident, it wasn't an accident. What did you do to him? Moretti tilted his head, his gaze dangerous. You're bolder than I expected. Robert made his choice. He thought he could betray me and walk away. He was wrong. But we're not here to talk about the past. I want the list. And if you don't give it to me, you won't live long enough to regret it. James squeezed Aisha's hand beneath the table, signaling her to stay calm. We have the complete list, he said evenly. But you'll only get half if she walks free. No more chases, no more threats. She gets to live her life. Moretti stared at James, sizing him up. Then he stood folding the paper and slipping it into his pocket. 1 week, he said coldly. Bring the complete list, or the girl dies. And you, Sullivan, don't think you're untouchable. I have eyes everywhere. He left his 2 bodyguards following. Aisha exhaled shakily, feeling like she'd just stepped away from a blade. He's not going to bargain, she whispered. He wants it all. James gripped her hand tightly. He's afraid. Those numbers proved we have leverage, but we need a different plan. He won't keep his word. Michael approached, his expression tense. He's got men outside the restaurant. We should go now. They exited through the rear door, getting into another vehicle arranged by Michael. On returning to Lincoln Park, Aisha stared out the window, her mind racing. James, she said softly, if we don't give him the list, he won't stop. But if we do, he'll kill me anyway. Won't he? James nodded, voice low. Yes, but we're not going to let him win. I have an idea, but it'll take time. Do you trust me? Aisha looked into his eyes and saw resolve, something gentler beneath it. I trust you, she said more firmly than she expected. Not far from Luce, a man photographed their departing car and sent the image to Moretti. They have the list. Moretti said into his phone, his voice venomous. Double the men. I want her before the week is over. Darkness blanketed Lincoln Park, with only the yellow glow of streetlights filtering through the windows of James Sullivan's house. Aisha Carter sat on the sofa, the tin box of family photos in front of her, a quiet reminder of the secret her father had left behind. The numbers on the photographs, account codes linked to $500 million belonging to Anthony Moretti, were her ticket to freedom and the source of her deepest peril. James stood near the electric fireplace, its flickering light casting soft shadows across his face, his sharp blue eyes contemplative. Michael, his head of security, had just left to reinforce the perimeter, leaving a heavy silence between the two. The meeting with Moretti at Luce still haunted Aisha. His threat, 1 week or the girl dies, echoed in her mind like a sentence hanging over her head. She clenched her fists, trying to suppress the trembling. James, she said hoarsely, we can't give him the list. He'll kill me whether he gets it or not. And you're not safe either. James nodded and came to sit beside her. I know. Moretti doesn't honor deals. He wants that list to secure his empire, and then he'll wipe out anyone who knows it existed, including you. He paused, voice steady. We need another way. I've thought about going to the police, but Moretti has eyes in the department. We need someone more reliable. Aisha glanced down at the photos, her fingers brushing the one of her father in front of the warehouse with Group 1995 faintly scrawled on the back. Anger and helplessness stirred inside her. Her father had died protecting this secret, and now it had only brought danger. "I'm tired of running," she said, voice low but firm. "I want this to end." "If we can't trust the police, what about the FBI? They're investigating Moretti, aren't they?" James frowned, considering. "The FBI is an option, but it's risky. They'll want you as a witness, or worse, as bait. Are you ready for that?" Aisha took a deep breath, her resolve growing. "I'm ready, if that's the only way to take him down. I can't live the rest of my life in fear, James. I want my life back, the bookstore, my dreams, all of it." James looked at her, his eyes filled with both concern and admiration. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met, Aisha. But this isn't a game. If the FBI uses you, you'll be in real danger." "Danger?" she scoffed bitterly. "I've been chased through the streets, had my apartment torn apart, and a crime boss wants me dead. The threat is already my reality. At least with the FBI, I have a chance to fight back." James was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I know someone, Agent Karen Lee from the Organized Crime Unit in Chicago. She worked with my company once during a money laundering case. I'll call her." The next morning, Aisha and James met Agent Karen Lee at a modest office inside the FBI's Roosevelt Road headquarters. In her 40s, with short black hair and sharp eyes, Karen's voice carried a calm authority. She examined the photographs Aisha brought, flipping through them carefully and taking notes on the numbers. "This is gold," Karen said, her tone excited. "If these numbers lead to Moretti's accounts, we can trace the flow of his dirty money, drugs, illegal casinos, all of it. But we'll need more evidence to arrest him." Aisha sat across from her, hands tightly clasped. "What kind of evidence? I've given you everything I have." Karen studied her for a moment. "Moretti is careful. He rarely leaves a trail. These numbers are a starting point, but to prosecute, we need him to admit something on tape or in front of a witness. And that's where you could help." James jumped in, voice hard. "Do you want to use Aisha as bait?" "Not. She's been through enough." Karen raised her hand gently. "I understand your concern, Mr. Sullivan, but this isn't bait. We're asking her to wear a recording device, meet Moretti in public, and prompt him to speak about the accounts just enough to link him. We'll have a SWAT team nearby. She'll be protected at all times." Aisha's heart pounded, but she forced herself to think clearly. She remembered Moretti's cold stare, his fake smile. He had destroyed her father's life, and now he was threatening hers. "I'll do it," she said, voice steady. "If this is how we stop him, I'll do it." James turned to her, concern in his eyes. "Aisha, you don't understand how dangerous Moretti is. You won't get out if he suspects anything, even for a second." "I understand," she replied, locking eyes with him. "But I can't keep hiding. He's threatening me, you, anyone who helps me. I want him to pay." Karen nodded, a flicker of respect in her gaze. "I'll arrange everything, the equipment, location, backup teams. We'll need a few days to plan. You'll be trained on how to stay calm and guide the conversation. Mr. Sullivan, you can be nearby, but no interference." James clenched his jaw, clearly displeased, but nodded. "I want your best team on her. If anything goes wrong, I won't forgive it." Karen offered a small smile. "Understood. We don't put civilians at risk unless it matters." At James's house, Aisha felt a strange tension and relief. Agreeing to work with the FBI was a turning point, but she knew it came with serious risks. She sat at the dining table, sorting through the photos again, hoping to find more clues. James stood behind her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "There's still time to back out." Aisha looked up, eyes steady. "I'm sure. My father hid these things to protect me. Now it's my turn to fight for myself." James sat beside her, his expression softening. "You're not just fighting for yourself. You're doing the right thing, Aisha. But I can't help worrying. If anything happened to you." He trailed off, voice catching. Aisha took his hand in hers, feeling its warmth. "Nothing will happen. We have the FBI. We have you. And I'm not easy to break." She smiled faintly, trying to ease the tension. "Besides, I survived Englewood my whole life. Moretti's scary, but he's not worse than the guys who used to hang out by the liquor store." James chuckled, but his eyes were still clouded with worry. "You're a fighter, Aisha. But promise me if something feels wrong, you'll follow Karen's lead and get out." "I promise," she said sincerely. That night, Aisha lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought of her father, her mother, the years she'd spent clawing her way through life. She thought of James, the stranger who had become her anchor in mere days. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt like she had a say for the first time in a long while. Across town, in the shadowy corner of a street near Lincoln Park, a man stood beneath a tree watching James's house through binoculars. He spoke softly into a phone. "She's still there. Sullivan hasn't left her side." Anthony Moretti's voice crackled on the other end, icy and controlled. "Keep an eye on them. If she meets with the FBI, I want to know immediately. No one's stopping me from taking back what's mine." Rain drizzled outside the window of James Sullivan's home in Lincoln Park, forming blurry streaks on the glass. Aisha Carter sat at the dining table, the soft glow of the overhead light illuminating the worn family photographs images in which her father, Robert Carter, had hidden the numbers leading to Anthony Moretti's $500 million account. She turned each photo over, trying to find more clues, but her mind kept drifting to her decision to cooperate with the FBI. In just 2 days, she would wear a recording device and confront Moretti, a thought that made her heart race despite her efforts to remain calm. James entered holding 2 mugs of hot tea, the faint scent of mint drifting through the air. He set one in front of Aisha, his soft blue eyes tinged with concern. He said, "You've been working all day sitting across from her. Take a break. The FBI will train you tomorrow morning. You need to conserve your strength." Aisha gave a faint smile, her finger brushing across the photo of her parents on their wedding day. "I don't know if I can rest. Every time I close my eyes, I see Moretti, his eyes, his voice." She paused, her voice lowering. "I'm scared, James, but I can't let him win." James reached across the table, gently taking her hand. His grip was warm and steady, like an anchor in a storm. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Aisha. Being afraid doesn't mean you're weak. You're doing something most people wouldn't dare facing a man like Moretti. I'm proud of you." His words reached something deep inside her, filling Aisha with a strange warmth. She looked into his eyes and saw sincerity and something more profound, a feeling she hadn't dared to name. "Why are you still here?" she asked softly. "You could walk away, live and stay out of this mess. I have nothing to give you in return, James." James smiled, but his gaze remained serious. "Do I want something in return?" "Aisha, I'm here because I care about you. From the night you jumped into my car, I saw someone strong and resilient, even when life hasn't been kind to you. I couldn't turn my back when you needed me. And—" he hesitated, as if wrestling with himself. "I'm falling in love with you." His confession stopped Aisha in her tracks, her heart thudding. She pulled her hand back, not in anger, but in surprise. "You don't know me, James," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm a girl from Englewood who works in a bookstore and takes life day by day. You have an empire. We're from 2 different worlds." James shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "Worlds don't matter. I see you, the woman who survived loss, who keeps going even when everything is against her. I see your dream to open a community bookstore and give books to Bronzeville kids. That's the woman I love, not where you're from." Aisha felt her eyes sting, but she held back the tears. She thought of the lonely years when she taught herself not to expect love or help from anyone. James had broken through that wall bit by bit with his kindness and patience. "I care about you too," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared. Not just of Moretti, but of this. Of these feelings. I don't know what I'll become if I let myself love you and then lose you." James stood, walked around the table and knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. His eyes were filled with honesty. "You won't lose me. I promise. We'll get through this. Moretti, the FBI, all of it. And when it's over, I want to be with you. If you'll let me." Aisha looked at him, feeling her heart open after years of being shut tight. She leaned down, her lips brushing his in a gentle, tender kiss. A kiss that carried fear, hope, and a connection neither had ever known. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his and whispered, "I want to try, but after this is over." "Okay." James smiled and nodded. "After this is over." The next morning, at an FBI training facility on the outskirts of Chicago, Aisha stood in front of Agent Karen Lee, feeling the tiny recording device secured under her blouse. Karen instructed her to stay calm and ask questions that might prompt Moretti to reveal information about accounts or criminal activities. "He's arrogant," Karen said, her voice steady. "If you press the right buttons, he'll brag. But if he gets suspicious, give the signal, touch your hair, or cough twice. SWAT will move in." Aisha nodded, trying to focus, but her eyes searched for James, who stood in the corner of the room, watching with concern. He had insisted on coming, even though Karen had objected. "I'll be okay," she told him after the training, trying to smile. "They know what they're doing." James took her hand, his voice low. "I know, but I can't help worrying. You mean everything to me, Aisha." His words made her feel both warm and burdened. She wanted to survive, not just for herself, but for him, for their future together. That afternoon in Lincoln Park, Aisha and James walked through the neighborhood park, trying to enjoy a moment of peace before the storm. The trees were lush, and the air carried a faint scent of rain. Aisha opened up about her dream, a bookstore where underprivileged kids could read for free, a place where the community could gather. "I want the kids in Bronzeville to know that books can change lives," she said, eyes shining like books changed mine. James listened, admiration in his eyes. "I want to help you make it real," he said. "When this is over, I'll fund it. We can start in Bronzeville and then expand." Aisha laughed for the first time in days. "Don't go making big promises, Sullivan. I might hold you to them." "I hope you do," he replied, squeezing her hand tighter. But the peace didn't last. When they returned home, Michael was waiting, his expression grave. "We have a problem," he said. "One of Moretti's men was spotted near the park taking pictures of the two of you. He knows what you're doing, Aisha." Aisha felt her blood turn cold. "What about the FBI?" "Do they know? Karen's been notified," Michael replied. "They're monitoring the situation, but Moretti has eyes everywhere. You need to stay indoors until the meeting." James tightened his grip on Aisha's hand, his eyes hardening. "He's trying to scare us, but we're not stopping. Do you still want to go through with this?" Aisha nodded, her voice firm. "More than ever. He wants me scared, but I'm going to make him pay." That night, in the darkened streets of Chicago, a man stood outside the FBI headquarters, speaking quietly on the phone. "She met with Agent Lee," he said. "They're planning something." Moretti, seated in his lavish office, gripped the phone tightly. "FBI," he growled. Add more men. I want her before she opens her mouth. Nightfall draped over Chicago, the city lights in the distance glimmering like stars on the horizon. Inside James Sullivan's safe house in Lincoln Park, Aisha Carter stood in front of a mirror, checking the tiny recording device hidden under her sweater. In just a few hours, she would meet Anthony Moretti in a public park downtown, where the FBI had stationed a SWAT team to protect her. But the air in the house was heavy, and it was as if Aisha and James could sense a looming threat. James entered, his blue eyes filled with concern. "Michael just reported in," he said, voice low. "There's unusual activity around the house. Moretti might have learned about the FBI's plan. Karen suggests relocating you to a safe house outside the city immediately." Aisha turned, heart racing. How could he know the FBI said this plan was secret? James gripped her hand tightly, his eyes steady. "Moretti has eyes everywhere, Aisha. But we're not letting him stop us. Michael's getting the car ready. Are you ready?" Aisha nodded, clutching the tin box that held the family photos. The clues leading to Moretti's $500 million account. A fiery determination burned within her. "I'm ready. He wants to scare me, but I'm not running anymore." Michael appeared at the door wearing a bulletproof vest gun holstered at his side. "We're moving now," he said firmly. 3 suspicious vehicles were spotted 2 blocks away. "We don't have much time." They exited through the back door and climbed into a black SUV. Michael drove. James sat beside Aisha in the back, his hand gripping hers tightly. The vehicle sped through the quiet streets of Lincoln Park, heading toward the outskirts of Chicago. Aisha stared out the window, watching the high-rises give way to open fields and sparse woods. She tried to stay calm, but a dark premonition clung to her. Suddenly, headlights flared behind them. "We're being followed," Michael growled, hitting the gas. 2 black cars appeared, closing in on the SUV. A gunshot rang out. The rear window shattered. Aisha screamed, ducking down. James pulled her lower, shielding her. "Keep going, Michael," he shouted. Michael swerved, turning onto a dirt road and cutting through a forest. Branches scraped against the sides, screeching sharply. "Safe house is 10 minutes out," he said tensely. "But they won't make it easy." Aisha clutched the photo box, her heart pounding. "What do they want? This box? Or you?" James answered, his voice grim. "Moretti knows you're his most significant threat." The dirt road led to a shimmering lake under the moonlight, Lake Michigan, vast and silent. Michael stopped near a small dock where 2 motorboats were moored. "We'll have to cross the lake," he said, jumping out. "There's a small island. We can hold out there." They rushed to the dock. Michael started one of the boats. Aisha and James leaped aboard. Waves slapped against the hull as the boat sped off. Behind them, 3 Moretti's cars skidded to a stop, and 4 men jumped out, boarding the second boat. "They're chasing us," Aisha shouted, seeing the enemy boat's lights flicker in pursuit. James held her hand, eyes steady. "We'll be okay. Michael, call the FBI." "Already did," Michael said, gripping the wheel. "Karen is dispatching a team, but it will take 30 minutes. Their boat reached a small island, about 50 meters wide, covered in trees and rocks. Michael pulled the ship into the brush, concealing it. "Find cover," he ordered, drawing his gun. Aisha, James, and Michael ran to a large boulder from where they could observe the dock. Aisha hugged the box tightly, adrenaline flooding her veins. She didn't want to hide. She tried to fight. The enemy boat's engine cut off. 4 armed men stepped onto the island. "We know you're here," one of them yelled, voice harsh. "Please, give us the girl and the box. No one gets hurt." Michael aimed his weapon, whispering, "I can take 2, but they've got the numbers. We hold them off until the FBI arrives." Aisha looked at James, her eyes resolute. "I have an idea," she whispered. If I go out and pretend to surrender, I can buy time. The recorder's still running. I could get them to say something worthwhile. James shook his head, fear in his eyes. No, Aisha. It's too dangerous. The danger is sitting here waiting for them to find us, she replied, her voice low but sharp. Trust me, James. I know what I'm doing. James hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but if anything goes wrong, I'm coming out. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise, Aisha said, taking a deep breath. She stood raising her hands, stepping out from behind the rock. Please don't shoot, she shouted, her voice shaky but clear. I'm here. I have the box. The 4 men turned guns trained on her. The leader, wearing a leather jacket, smirked. Smart girl. Give us the box and we'll let you walk. Aisha strolled, holding the box close. She said, I'll give it to you, sounding calmer than she felt. But I want to know why Moretti needs this. What are these numbers? His money, right? The leader frowned, but arrogance made him speak. $500 million, girl. The money that keeps the boss's empire standing. Your daddy took it. Now you're giving it back. Aisha nodded, stalling. And if I don't? What'll he do? Kill me like he did my father? The man scoffed. Your old man brought it on himself. The boss doesn't like traitors. Please give us the box or I'll shoot. A siren wailed in the distance, and flashing lights danced across the lake. FBI, a loudspeaker blared. Drop your weapons. Hands in the air. The 4 men panicked, spinning and firing toward the FBI boat. Michael and James sprang from the rock, Michael shooting one of the attackers. Aisha ducked and ran toward James. He pulled her behind the boulder, wrapping her in his arms. You're insane, he whispered, but his eyes gleamed with admiration. The gunfight was short but fierce. The FBI SWAT team overpowered the attackers, capturing the remaining 3 alive. Agent Karen Lee stepped onto the island, her expression serious. Is everyone okay? She asked, checking on Aisha. I'm fine, Aisha panted, still holding the photo box. Did the recorder work? Karen nodded, offering a small smile. Perfectly. You got a confession about the money and your father's death. It's not enough to arrest Moretti yet, but it's a strong start. James squeezed Aisha's hand, pride shining in his eyes. You did it, Aisha. But Aisha knew Moretti was still out there. She looked across Lake Michigan, moonlight shimmering on the surface, and felt a renewed determination. He's not done, she whispered. But neither am I. Downtown Chicago. Moretti answered a call from one of his men. She got away, the man reported, voice shaking. FBI showed up too fast. Moretti slammed his hand on the table, his eyes blazing. Find another way. I want her dead before she speaks in court. Night blanketed Chicago, the distant city lights sparkling like stars along the horizon. Inside James Sullivan's safe house in Lincoln Park, Aisha Carter stood before the mirror, checking the tiny recording device hidden beneath her sweater. In just a few hours, she would meet Anthony Moretti in a public park downtown, where the FBI had stationed a SWAT team to protect her. But the air inside the house was heavy, and it was as if Aisha and James could feel danger creeping closer. James entered, his blue eyes full of concern. Michael just reported in, he said in a low voice. There's unusual activity around the house. Moretti might have found out about the FBI's plan. Karen suggests moving you to a safe house outside the city immediately. Aisha turned, her heart racing. How could he possibly know? The FBI said this plan was classified. James tightened his grip on her hand, eyes resolute. Moretti has eyes everywhere, Aisha. But we're not letting him stop us. Michael's getting the car ready. Are you ready? Aisha nodded, clutching the tin box that held her family photos, the clues that could lead to Moretti's $500 million account. A burning sense of resolve filled her. I'm ready. He wants to scare me, but I won't run anymore. Michael appeared in the doorway, wearing a bulletproof vest with a pistol holstered at his side. "We're leaving now," he said sharply. 3 suspicious vehicles were spotted 2 blocks away. "We don't have much time." They exited through the back door and got into a black SUV. Michael drove. James sat beside Aisha in the back, his hand gripping hers tightly. The SUV sped through the quiet streets of Lincoln Park, heading toward the outskirts of Chicago. Aisha looked out the window, watching the skyscrapers gradually give way to open fields and sparse forests. She tried to remain calm, but a dark feeling lingered. Suddenly, headlights flashed in the rearview mirror. "We're being tailed," Michael growled, flooring the gas. 2 black cars appeared closing in on the SUV. A gunshot rang out. The rear window shattered. Aisha screamed, ducking low. James pulled her down, shielding her with his body. "Just drive, Michael," he shouted. Michael swerved sharply, turning onto a dirt road that led through a forest. Branches scraped against the car, screeching loudly. "The safe house is 10 minutes away," he said tensely. "But they won't let us get there easily." Aisha clutched the photo box, heart pounding. "What do they want?" "This box." "Or you," James replied grimly. "Moretti knows you're his most significant threat." The dirt road opened to a lake shimmering under the moonlight, Lake Michigan, vast and silent. Michael stopped the car near a small dock where 2 motorboats were tied. "We have to cross the lake," he said, jumping out. "There's a small island in the middle. We can hold out there." They rushed to the dock. Michael started one of the boats, and Aisha and James jumped aboard. Waves slapped against the sides as the boat surged forward. Behind them, 3 Moretti's cars skidded to a stop, and 4 men jumped out, boarding the second boat. "They're following us," Aisha shouted, spotting the flashing lights of the pursuer's boat. James gripped her hand, his gaze steady. "We'll be fine. Michael, call the FBI." "Already did," Michael said, hands locked on the wheel. "Karen's sending a team, but it'll take 30 minutes. Their boat reached a small island about 50 meters wide, covered with trees and rocks. Michael pulled the ship into the brush, concealing it. "Find cover," he ordered, drawing his gun. Aisha, James, and Michael ran to a large boulder where they could observe the dock. Aisha hugged the photo box, adrenaline flooding her system. She didn't want to hide, she tried to fight. The enemy boat's engine cut off. 4 armed men stepped onto the island. "We know you're here," one of them shouted, his voice rough. "Please give us the girl in the box. No one gets hurt." Michael aimed his weapon, whispering, "I can take down 2, but they've got the numbers. We need to hold them off until the FBI gets here." Aisha turned to James, eyes fierce. "I have an idea," she whispered. "If I go out and pretend to surrender, I can buy us some time. The recorder's still running. I could get them to say something worthwhile." James shook his head, clearly worried. "No, Aisha, it's too dangerous. The danger is staying here, waiting for them to find us." She snapped in a low voice. "Trust me, James. I know what I'm doing." James hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But if anything goes wrong, I'm coming out. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," Aisha said, taking a deep breath. She stood, raised her hands, and stepped from behind the rock. "Please don't shoot," she shouted, her voice shaky but clear. "I'm here. I have the box." The 4 men turned guns, trained on her. The leader, wearing a leather jacket, smirked. "Smart girl. Give us the box and we'll let you walk." Aisha strolled, clutching the box tightly. "I'll give it," she said, her voice calmer than she felt. "But I want to know why Moretti needs this. What are these numbers?" "His money, right?" The leader frowned, but his arrogance made him talk. $500 million, girl. The money that keeps the boss's empire standing. Your daddy took it and now you're giving it back." Aisha nodded, stalling for time. And if I don't, what'll he do? Kill me like he killed my father? The man laughed dryly. Your old man brought it on himself. The boss doesn't like traitors. Please give me the box, or I'll shoot now. Siren wails echoed from afar, FBI lights flashing over the lake. FBI, a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Drop your weapons! Surrender! The four men panicked, spinning and firing toward the FBI boat. Michael and James burst from behind the rock, and Michael shot one of the attackers. Aisha ducked low, running toward James. He pulled her behind the boulder, wrapping her in his arms. You're insane, he whispered, but his eyes gleamed with admiration. The gunfight was short, but intense. The FBI SWAT team overwhelmed the attackers, capturing the remaining 3 alive. Agent Karen Lee stepped onto the island, her expression serious. Is everyone okay? She asked, checking on Aisha. I'm fine, Aisha panted, still clutching the photo box. Did the recorder work? Karen nodded, offering a faint smile. Perfect. You got a confession about the money and your father's death. It's not enough to arrest Moretti yet, but it's a strong start. James squeezed Aisha's hand, pride shining in his eyes. You did it, Aisha. But Aisha knew Moretti was still out there. She looked over Lake Michigan, the moonlight shimmering on the surface, and felt a new resolve. He's not done, she whispered. But neither am I. In downtown Chicago, Moretti answered a call from one of his men. She got away. The man reported, his voice trembling. The FBI showed up too fast. Moretti slammed his hand on the table, his eyes burning with fury. Find another way. I want her dead before she speaks to the court. Early summer sunlight filtered through the trees in Millennium Park, Chicago, casting shimmering patches of light across the green lawn. Aisha Carter stood in front of a small crowd, heart pounding, as she cut the red ribbon at the entrance of her new bookstore in Bronzeville. The sign above read, Carter's Haven, a dream she had carried for years, now finally a reality. The crowd clapped, children cheered, and Aisha smiled, feeling like a new chapter of her life had just begun. James Sullivan stood beside her, his blue eyes glowing with pride. He had partially funded the bookstore, but clarified that this was Aisha's achievement. You did it, Aisha, he whispered, holding her hand. This is yours. Aisha squeezed his hand, her heart overflowing with gratitude. 6 months had passed since Anthony Moretti was arrested, and her life had changed. She no longer had to run and no longer feared stepping outside. The FBI had confirmed that Moretti's empire had collapsed, and with his enforcers either imprisoned or on the run, she was finally free. But freedom wasn't just about escaping danger. It was the chance to build a life she once thought impossible. Carter's Haven wasn't just a bookstore. It had a free reading corner for children filled with colorful beanbag chairs and shelves of picture books. A community space hosted storytelling hours and book clubs drawing people of all ages from Bronzeville. Aisha had hired 2 young employees from the neighborhood, and Mr. Harris, the former bookstore owner, attended the grand opening, smiling like a proud father. Your parents would be so proud, Mr. Harris said, patting Aisha's shoulder. You've turned this place into a home. Aisha nodded, eyes stinging. She thought of her father, Robert Carter, who had sacrificed his life to protect her from Moretti. She had named the bookstore after him, a tribute to his courage. Her mother, who had always encouraged her love for reading, felt present on every carefully arranged shelf. After the ceremony, Aisha and James walked through Bronzeville, the warm sun on their shoulders. I still can't believe it, she said, her voice filled with wonder and joy. A year ago, I was running through the streets. Now I have a bookstore of my own. James smiled, holding her hand. You didn't just survive, Aisha. You built a legacy. The kids here will grow up with books because of you. Aisha leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling a rare, peaceful stillness. They had been officially dating since the Moretti case, though she still lived in her old apartment in Englewood, wanting to maintain her independence. James respected that, even though he often invited her to his Lincoln Park home, where they shared quiet dinners and discussed the future. "Have you thought about moving out of Englewood?" James asked gently. "Not because I want to pressure you, but I want you safe and closer to me." Aisha laughed, glancing at him. "You want me to move to Lincoln Park and live in your fancy house, don't you, Sullivan?" James chuckled, his eyes warm. "I want you wherever you're happiest. But I'll admit, I like the idea of waking up next to you every morning." Aisha stopped walking, looking into his eyes. She could feel his love, a love that asked for nothing, imposed nothing. "I've been thinking about moving," she said honestly. "Not to Lincoln Park, but an apartment in Bronzeville close to the store. And I want you to be part of that." James leaned in, kissing her gently. "I'll be part of anything you want, Aisha." A month later, Aisha and James held a small wedding in Millennium Park, where they once walked together. Only a few close friends, bookstore staff, and agent Karen Lee, who had become their friend, were present. Aisha wore a simple white dress, her hair down, and eyes shining with happiness. In a gray suit, James couldn't take his eyes off her. As they exchanged vows, Aisha felt like all the pain of the past loss, fear, loneliness had led her to this moment. "James," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you gave me a safe place when I needed it most. But more than that, you gave me faith in love and myself. I promise to stand by you no matter what life brings." James held her hand, his eyes bright. "Aisha, you changed me the night you jumped into my car. You showed me that life isn't about work or money, but the people we love. I promise to protect and love you forever." They kissed beneath applause, sunlight filtering through the trees like a blessing. After the ceremony, they danced their first dance on the grass, laughing like children. Aisha rested against James's chest, feeling like she had finally found home, not a place, but a person. They moved into a small house by the lake in Evanston, just outside Chicago. Not as luxurious as James's Lincoln Park home, but cozy with large windows overlooking Lake Michigan and a modest garden. Aisha continued running Carter's Haven, turning it into a vibrant community hub. James supported her by funding reading programs for underprivileged children, while shifting his company toward projects like affordable housing and community centers. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the lake, Aisha shared a new idea. She said, "I want to open another bookstore, eyes glowing maybe in Englewood. I want to bring books to where I grew up, where people need them the most." James smiled, pulling her close. "I knew you wouldn't stop, and I'll be here helping you every step of the way." Aisha leaned into him, listening to his steady heartbeat. She thought about her journey from a girl running for her life on the South Side to a woman building dreams and a family. Moretti had lost not just because he was arrested, but because he couldn't break her spirit. But in a shadowy corner of Chicago, a man stood in an alley reading a message on his phone. "Moretti wants her silenced permanently," the message read. The man smirked and slipped the phone into his pocket, his eyes cold. In the autumn of 2026, golden leaves fluttered down onto the narrow road in Evanston, a suburb of Chicago, where Aisha and James Sullivan had settled. Their lakeside home was filled with the laughter of children and the scent of freshly baked cookies. Aisha Carter now. Aisha Sullivan held her 1-year-old daughter Maya on her hip while stirring a pot of soup on the stove. With brown eyes like her mother and a radiant smile, Maya babbled, Mama making Aisha laugh. James walked in from the garage, sleeves rolled up, carrying a bag of vegetables from the farmer's market. "How's our little army doing?" he asked, kissing Aisha on the cheek before lifting Maya, making her giggle. He spun her in the air, his blue eyes lighting joyfully. "The little army is demanding food. Aisha replied, glancing at him with a playful smile. And the army's mother is exhausted. The bookstore was packed today, and Maya refused to nap. How about you? Is everything okay at the company? James placed Maya into her high chair and poured soup into a bowl for her. It's fine. The affordable housing project in Englewood is moving forward, but honestly, I just wanted to come home to my two girls. He sat down, gazing gently at Aisha. Are you okay? You look tired. Aisha nodded, but her smile faded slightly. She loved her new life. Carter's Haven, the bookstore in Bronzeville, was thriving. Maya was her greatest joy, and James was a wonderful husband. But being a mother and running a business left her drained. She often stayed up late reviewing financials, and the occasional dreams of Moretti still startled her awake. I'm okay, she said, though her voice wavered a little. It's just, sometimes I miss who I used to be. When it was just me and my little apartment in Englewood. Things were simpler, even if they were hard. James reached across the table and held her hand, eyes sincere. You're doing so well, Aisha. But you don't have to do everything alone. I'm here. And if you need a break, we can hire more help at the bookstore. Aisha smiled, squeezing his hand. I know. I just don't want to fail. I want Maya to grow up seeing her mother as strong as my father taught me. James kissed her hand. You're the strongest person I know. And Maya already has a fantastic mom. A week later, a greater challenge came. Maya came down with a high fever, crying through the night, making Aisha and James deeply worried. They took her to the Children's Hospital in downtown Chicago, where the doctor diagnosed a mild case of pneumonia. She'll be fine, the doctor said, but she needs rest and medication. Aisha sat by Maya's hospital bed, holding her tiny hand, her heart heavy. Maya's fever reminded her of the days she was sick herself, running through the streets of the South Side scared and alone. She remembered the nights her mother held her when she was ill, and the pain of losing her mother came flooding back. I don't want to lose her, she whispered to James, eyes stinging with tears. James held her close, his voice low. You won't lose her, Maya's strong like her mother, and we have each other. In the following days, Aisha and James took turns caring for Maya, getting little sleep and full of worry. Aisha temporarily closed the bookstore, handing it over to the staff so she could focus on her daughter. One night, after Maya finally slept peacefully, Aisha leaned against James on the hospital couch, feeling exhausted but grateful. She said, I never thought I could love someone this much looking at Maya. But it's scary, too. I'm afraid of messing up. James kissed her hair. We will mess up, Aisha, but we'll learn, and we'll do our best for her. 3 years later, Aisha was pregnant with their second child, a boy they named Robert after her father. Robert was born on a bright spring day, with curly hair like James and warm brown skin like Aisha. Maya, now 4 years old, became a devoted big sister, always wanting to read books to him. Aisha ran Carter's Haven with the support of a larger team, and she opened a reading corner in Englewood, just as she had once dreamed. But the challenges didn't end. One afternoon, while Aisha was hosting a storytelling event at the bookstore, she received a call from Karen Lee. Aisha, Karen, said, her tone serious. An old enforcer of Moretti's has just been released. He's not considered a significant threat, but I want you to be careful. We're monitoring him. Aisha felt a chill down her spine, but forced herself to stay calm. Thanks, Karen. I'll tell James. That night, she told James, her eyes full of concern. I thought we were done with him, she said. But I'll never be free. James pulled her into an embrace, voice firm. We'll be safe. I've already called Michael. He'll increase security. And you're not alone, Aisha. We're a family. Aisha nodded, resting her head against him. She looked over at Maya and Robert, playing on the rug, her heart filling with determination. She had defeated Moretti once, and would protect her family at all costs. But in a dark alley on the west side, the recently released man held a photo of Aisha, his eyes cold. Moretti wants her silent, he muttered, slipping the photo into his pocket. Summer 2075. The golden sunset bathed the surface of Lake Michigan, reflecting off the lush green lawn where the Sullivan family had gathered. Aisha Sullivan, now in her 70s, stood beside her husband James, her brown eyes still bright despite her silver hair. They were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary at their lakeside home in Evanston, a suburb of Chicago, where they had built a life full of love. Surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, the air was filled with laughter and the smooth sounds of jazz. Maya, now a 49-year-old social activist, stood beside her younger brother Robert, a 45-year-old teacher, both wearing their mother's smile. The grandchildren of Aisha and James ran across the grass, chasing each other with colorful balloons. Aisha held James's hand, feeling the familiar warmth in his touch, and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said, her voice raspy but filled with emotion. James, his hair white, but his blue eyes still sharp, leaned down and kissed her forehead. "The longest, the most beautiful," he replied. "From the night you jumped into my car, I knew my life would never be the same." Aisha laughed, remembering 2025, when she fled through the streets of the South Side, burning with fever and fear, only to find James the man who changed everything. They had faced off against Anthony Moretti, a crime boss who threatened her life, and emerged victorious through courage and love. But their journey didn't end there. It became a lifetime of building family community and a legacy far beyond anything they had ever dreamed. That journey was not easy. In 2030, when Maya and Robert were still young, Aisha received word that a former enforcer of Moretti's named Victor Russo had been tracking her. Recently released from prison, he sought revenge, convinced Aisha was the reason for Moretti's downfall. Karen Lee, now a retired FBI agent, warned them, and James immediately tightened security. One night, Russo broke into the Carter's Haven bookstore in Bronzeville, vandalized the shelves, and left a message in red paint: "You can't escape." Though afraid, Aisha refused to let the past control her. She cooperated with the police and used the security cameras to catch Russo when he returned. He was sentenced to another 10 years in prison, and this time there was no longer a threat from Moretti. "He's lost," Aisha told James, standing in the damaged bookstore, her eyes steady. "He can't take away what we've built." James embraced her, his voice low. "You're my warrior, Aisha. I always have been." They continued building their legacy. Carter's Haven expanded with Englewood and the West Side branches, symbolizing hope in Chicago's underserved neighborhoods. Aisha wrote a book titled From Running to Found, telling the story of her journey from an orphaned girl in Englewood to the woman who brought down Moretti and built a community. The book became a bestseller, and she donated the profits to educational programs for underprivileged children. James shifted Sullivan Enterprises toward philanthropic efforts, building affordable housing schools and community libraries. Maya, inspired by her parents, founded a nonprofit to help women escape domestic violence. Driven by his passion for teaching, Robert opened a free school in Bronzeville, where children learned math, literature, courage, and kindness. Aisha and James became grandparents in 2050 when Maya had her first child. They loved their grandchildren deeply, but always taught them the value of hard work and compassion. "Money doesn't make you who you are," Aisha told her grandchildren, her eyes shining. "Love and kindness do." At the 50th anniversary celebration, Aisha and James stood before their family and renewed their vows. 50 years ago, Aisha said, trembling, "I thought I was running from danger. But I found you, James, my home, my love. Thank you for never letting go." James held her hand, eyes glistening. "Aisha, you were my destiny. I knew I was meant to love and protect you from that very night. Thank you for giving me a family and a purpose." They kissed to the sound of applause. The golden sunset, bathing them like a blessing. Maya and Robert embraced their parents, and the grandchildren ran toward them, wrapping around their legs. Aisha looked around, her heart full of gratitude. She thought of her parents, of the losses that had led her here. She thought of Moretti, the man who had nearly destroyed her, but who had only made her stronger in the end. After the party, Aisha and James sat on the porch, looking out over the shimmering waters of Lake Michigan. "Do you have any regrets?" James asked, his voice deep. Aisha shook her head and smiled. "No. It was all worth every pain and trial to have you in this family." James pulled her close, his eyes glowing. "We did well, didn't we?" "Very well," she replied, leaning into him. Under the moonlight, they sat together, wrapped in the love that had carried them through 50 years. Somewhere in the shadows of Chicago, the memory of Moretti had faded, leaving only the legacy of Aisha and James, a story of courage, love, and a home built from dreams.